Now we will stick with the topic of type 2 and we will meet an avid type 2 advocate from the US. She's been living with type 2 for many years, or so she thought. Let's talk about that. Welcome to the stage, Tiara.
Hi, Stephanie. Thanks for having me this morning.
Hi, good to have you here. So I kind of gave it away there, was a little bit of a spoiler alert. So your story starts with a misdiagnosis.
Yes. So I was first diagnosed with type 2 diabetes a few days after our 4th of July holiday in 2017. My A1C was 15.5%, and my doctor at the time said, well, you have full-blown diabetes, and if you had waited any longer, I would have had to go to the ER. I had all of the symptoms, like I lost a lot of weight, but I thought it was because I was training really hard. My hair started to fall out at some point. And the only resources that I received at the time were just a few pamphlets on nutrition and exercise. And I was in my master's degree in nutrition at the time, so I already knew a lot about it. But I didn't get any real help as to like the practicalities of managing diabetes. And I was put on Lantus as well and metformin, but wasn't educated about low blood sugar, was just told, take this twice a day and I'll see you again in 3 months.
3 months, wow.
Yeah. So, I know a lot of people with type 2 who have similar experiences at diagnosis as well. A couple of years later in 2019, I had a high blood sugar, like the highest that I'd had since diagnosis. I think it went up to like over 400. And a former coworker bought me some ketone strips, and I saw that I tested for, small ketones at the time. And another coworker set me up with her endocrinologist, and I explained all of my symptoms to the endo, and she said, well, why don't you just come in, and I just have some questions. Maybe it sounds like you may actually have type 1. And she ran an autoantibody test. And later on, she said, welcome to the type 1 club. You actually have type 1 diabetes. And up until then, like things that had happened, and this is how I thought something was wrong, like my metformin dosage just kept going up. It was harder to bring my blood sugars down. I was able to get my A1C down to, I think, 10% since my diagnosis, but I was having so much trouble getting it below that. I didn't know what CGMs were until I started working at Beyond Type 1. And I didn't know that things like Humalog or Novolog were a possibility for me. So there were just a whole world of type 2 care or diabetes care that I just did not thought applied to me because I had type 2. So yeah, that's
so what was your emotional reaction? What did you think at that moment? Were you just glad to finally have the right diagnosis? Were you angry? What did it feel like?
I was a little sad because a part of the reason why I got into diabetes advocacy is because I didn't know anyone else with type 2 diabetes who was my age. At the time I was like 25, 26. I didn't know anyone else who had type 2. I hardly knew anything about diabetes at all. And I wanted to at least be that person that could help other people not feel alone. So I was already so entrenched into type 2 diabetes advocacy that when I found out I had type 1, part of me felt like I'd lost something. Like, was my advocacy still valid? Was it my place to still advocate for people with type 2? I think in the years since, and I actually had a conversation with my late boss, Tom, CEO of Beyond Type 1. And he told me that my experience is my experience. Like, you don't know what you don't know, and it shouldn't change the way that I advocate for people with type 2. If anything, after that conversation, I thought, no, this is actually a reason to go harder, because if I'm just now figuring out that all these tools are available to me just because the classification of my diabetes changed, then why can't people with type 2 get the same information? I mean, there are people with type 2 who are on Lantus and Humalog and need CGMs and need insulin pumps as well. So if anything, it was an opportunity for me to say, hey, do you know that all these are available to you as well, and you should have the same information?
And if it's not available to you, that's the next thing we're going to fight for, right?
Exactly. And
access is a huge issue.
And I would like to say, like, I think my experience is just a shining example of what type 2 diabetes stigma could look like. I mean, there were people who, I mean, I'm someone who lives in a relatively larger body. I'm brown skinned and I'm older. So of course I probably got a type 2 diagnosis based on that. But being misdiagnosed with type 2 diabetes can be very deadly. I mean, if someone isn't getting the right diagnosis at the time. So I think it's just really important for healthcare providers to just make sure that you have the right diagnosis. But I always hope that my story is inspiring others, including other patients who may think they might have been misdiagnosed, to try to advocate for themselves to get the right diagnosis too.
Yeah, so important. And I think you mentioned this before to me. There shouldn't be any stigma in any type of diabetes, also not type 2, but let's just make sure that everyone gets the correct diagnosis.
Exactly. And I'll also add, like, I've had a couple of folks when I found out that I had type 1 who said, oh, that's great. You have type 1 and not type 2. And I said, well, wait, hold on.
What does that mean exactly?
Like, I'm like, if I had type 2, that's also okay.
Yeah.
I just want the right diagnosis so that way I know the best way to take care of myself. You know, and that's really the point of it. Whether you're type 1 or type 2, you deserve the best care.
Absolutely. And I applaud you. I mean, I wish I could say that this is the first misdiagnosis story that I've heard or that we've had on Doc Day. It's not. There's many out there who experience things just like you, but I think it's so incredible that you decided to stick with the type 2 advocacy anyways, because it's so important.
And I've met several folks over the years, a lot of them who are friends of mine, who've also been found out they were misdiagnosed. Some of them were misdiagnosed for up to a decade. And I'm like, that is insane. And I know for a few of them, like, they've asked their doctors for autoantibody tests, and sometimes their doctors have said no, because they're like, what do you mean? There's no way you can have type 1. And they've had to get second opinion and then another opinion just to get
really fight for it,
that would run those tests for them. So yeah, I mean, there are quite a bit of us who have been misdiagnosed, but make no mistake, even if I found that I actually had type 2, I would still I don't think I would have changed as a person. My advocacy would have still continued. But I feel, as someone who does have type 1, that I should be standing up for people with type 2 and amplifying their experiences, and making sure that the community is a safe space for them as well.
I think that we can all agree on. Thank you so much, Tiara, for coming on and for sharing your story.
Thank you, Steffi.